Welcome to Markets Now. I'm Michelle Rook with Matt Bennett, agmarket.net. Well, following the WASDE, we do see all the greens to the plus side. And Matt, let's kind of try to unpack a little bit of this report. First of all, corn production looks to be down from last year, and ending stocks came in at 2.1 billion bushels. Tell me your assessment of those two numbers first off.
Right. I mean, one of the reasons that new crop came in at 2.1, we got to backtrack a little bit and look at what old crop did. What happened with old crop is that, essentially you raised demand 100 million bushels. And I don't know that everyone was expecting 100. Our team thought that they would raise maybe 50 and then leave a little bit in the tank to raise later. But that brought old crop stocks down to just a shade over 2 billion. So that's what you're carrying in to the new crop balance sheet. You carry that in, and you've got 90 million acres planted. Even with a 181 yield, you come in at a shade over 2.1. 2.1, in my opinion, like I told you, Michelle, before we came on here, if you'd have said that back in February that you were going to have a 2.1 for new crop balance sheet in the month of May, the first look, most people would have said there's no way, that's too low. So it's actually a manageable number. I'm not going to say it's bullish. It's still over 2 billion. It's just a lot less than what most people thought all winter.
Yeah, no doubt. So you think the market is fairly priced at this level then with the 2.1 carry out for next year?
Regardless of whether we were going to be bullish or bearish today, I felt like the weather over the weekend and then the forecast on Monday is probably going to have a bigger impact on what's going on. I mean, most people felt like this would be a bearish report today. The fact that it was a little bit friendly, you would think maybe the market really take off to the races. It looked like it might for a little bit, but quite frankly, it's been kind of a muted effort, really not a whole lot doing. And so, but I do think moving forward, Michelle, it's a lot about the weather. There's a lot of implications here. A lot of folks thought that you come in here on June 30th and you're going to raise acreage, you had a little bit of a rally and maybe that report was just a little bit too low in March. Well, that's pretty tough to say whenever you've got Illinois so far behind and a fair amount of the Eastern Corn Belt still tracking behind. We've got to get the crop planted first. And I think that that's a reason why maybe the market's going to pay a little closer attention to the weather, than the first look, at least at the balance sheet.
Absolutely. South American numbers, though, 2 million metric ton decrease in both Brazil and Argentina, but that's not enough here. We're not even close to CONAB yet, are we?
No, and I don't want their job. Okay. But, CONAB's, 8 million still lower, I think in Brazil. I mean, they're significantly lower on that Brazilian corn crop than what the USDA is. Last year, the USDA slow played their production estimates in Argentina, even though they had what most were calling like a biblical level drought. With that being the case, at the end of the year, they basically had to come to task and say, well, actually, it was a 25 million metric ton crop, half a crop in essence. It's a tough job to try to handicap this thing. So, I think the weather in the last couple of weeks, in my opinion, would maybe lead me to believe that the USDA is much too high, on the Brazilian size of the corn crop. If they stay hot and dry, I've got to think in that part of the country, at least, we know in the South it's awfully wet, but if they stay that dry in that part of the country, I think the USDA is going to have to do some serious shaving moving forward.
Yeah, and we've thought that for a couple months and been disappointed. So we'll see if they can do it in the future. All right, soybeans, let's move over to that market because we did see with the higher acreage, production was up sharply. Ending stocks up only about 100 million bushels. So talk me through that one.
Yeah, and so obviously soybean production is going to go up a fair amount with a couple of different things. First of all, of course, you're planting more bean acres, almost 3 million more bean acres planted this year. That's what came out there in March. That's the number we knew they were going to use. Then they're using the baseline yield of 52. And so, if you're going to use those two numbers, that brings you to production significantly in excess of what you saw last year. And so, yeah, they're going to come in here and raise crush. Bottom line is, I think most of us can agree that crush is going to continue to trend higher. We know that crush plants that are being built currently or recently brought online, obviously the goal is to get those running full speed ahead. And so, I've got to think that it's a little bit disappointing when I look at the numbers on beans. I mean, obviously, if you were calling the two reports one thing or another, I would say you're a little more friendly this corn report than maybe what you might be as far as soybeans is concerned. Because if the yield would go up, are you going to start to enter a discussion sooner or later on pushing $500 million? Which that's something that we haven't seen for 5 years or so. So. I can't say that I'm near as excited about the bean report as what maybe I am with corn.
Yeah, and then a little disappointing in terms of the South American numbers. Again, really not much change there on soybeans, right?
Right. And I do think that, of course, this Brazilian flooding situation in southern Brazil has maybe been more of a little more of a recent story. But I would have thought, maybe they would have tipped their cap to that. Certainly sticking, with this 155 type deal. They came down a couple. Boy, I don't know. A lot of these folks are in the mid 140s. USDA still seems to be too high. Once again, I don't want their job. I don't know that I've got a good enough feel for it to bet a lot of money that they're wrong. It's just over the last couple of years, it certainly seems like being maybe the last one to make an adjustment, certainly has not looked great in the end.
Right. Let's talk about prices, though. Ending stocks at 340 million bushels, old crop 445, new crop. Are we too high with prices with those big numbers?
Michelle, we felt like we would have a really good shot at a 400 plus type number, and then earlier this week we were trading 1230 November beans. 1230 November beans for a lot of folks in the I states is pushing up on $12 out of the field. And so, we didn't go up and fill that gap up at the 1240 area, which is what we were kind of hoping to see. I mean, there's still a chance we might see that happen. If it does, though, if you're talking a 445 carry, if you go back in time and you look at the last time you saw carry, that was even above 300, you're going to go back to 2019. And you don't really want to look and see what the average cash price was then, because I believe it was sub $9. And so, that's not really something that we expect necessarily. But a 445 carry, once again, that's with a 52 yield. So I know these beans didn't get in the ground as early as what most of us would like to have seen. I don't want to start talking about lower yields. I still think the bean crop has the potential to be awfully good. These genetics are fantastic. So if you do tick that yield up a bushel, again, you're talking over 500, and that does not equate with $12 beans in anybody's book. So yeah, I do think prices are probably a touch rich if we have a halfway decent growing season.
No doubt. Wheat, let's talk about that one. Production, the all wheat production number down 30 million bushels from the average trade guess, but ending stocks at 766 million bushels. Is that bullish or bearish? Because it was down from expectations.
It's down from expectations, but up from old crop stocks. And so,
Yeah.
you've got to think that it's not necessarily bullish, but then you look over on the board and at one time you're trading 20 cents higher. A lot of folks are looking at it saying, yeah, maybe it wasn't the most friendly report, but it was friendlier. Yeah, it was friendly versus expectations. Let's put it that way. In the grand scheme of things, which is what I like looking at it. I guess I'm a little bit cautious to get too friendly wheat with that kind of a number out there. 700 plus, in my opinion, is plenty rich, especially whenever we were below 700 this year. I don't know. Russia, we know that there's a story there. We don't know exactly what's going to happen as far as this frost freeze event, how many acres potentially would be lost. I saw some people saying, well, they're thinking about replant. Well, it's pretty tough to replant winter wheat in the spring, but clearly you can still plant wheat. It's just not going to be winter wheat. So it'd be very interesting to see how this wheat market plays out. But I wouldn't say that this report, if I was looking at all three of them, which one would I be most excited about? It wouldn't be wheat, but yet wheat's leading the charge higher. And I think that's a really good thing for the corn and bean markets.
Yeah, because rising tide lifts all boats.
Absolutely.
Obviously, we sometimes see the wheat market move first, but we're trading global production concerns. USDA did acknowledge a 3.5 million metric ton drop in the Russian crop, but in the scheme of things, that still isn't a whole lot. So, is this just fund short covering that we're seeing over here in the wheat?
I've got to think so. I feel like the funds have looked over at the ags here over the last several days and said, if things aren't ideal moving forward, do we really want to be carrying these huge short positions? And so you look at global wheat production, and it was actually up. you had Russia down 3.5, like you said, EU's down, but bottom line is global production's up. And so that's what the forecast is anyway. And so if global production is going to be up, it's pretty tough for me to sit here and get super friendly. But yes, the funds, in my opinion, felt like they're out of balance. I felt like the funds have felt that way probably on all three, but especially on corn and wheat. It just seems like, as you continue to get this move higher, I mean, it's kind of a stair step type approach. It seems like to me, maybe in the corn market. And with that being the case, I've got to think the funds just continue in waves, and then you see hedge pressure on the other side of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, if we have a higher close today, do you think that the funds will continue to cover the short position that they have? And then do they move long or not?
I don't know that they move long, Michelle. I mean, that's a tough thing. I think that the goal of the funds, and I'm not a money market manager, I'm not one of these managers. But what I'll say is this. I mean, you're sitting here with what I would say is a less ideal spring than a year ago. It's not a bad spring. Yes, you're a little bit behind. I don't think that, for instance, a state like Illinois, I don't think that you got a lot done this week. And so you're probably not going to get 50% by the 10th of May, like we're talking in the middle of the May. I don't think it's going to happen. And with that being the case, if I'm a fund manager, I'm sitting here saying, don't I want to be nimble? Don't I want to be agile? If you do get into a hot and dry environment going into pollination, what if you don't plant 90 million acres? What if you got to take the yield down 5-6 bushel? And so again, a 181 at 2.1 is not all that bearish, considering we've never raised a 181. And so are we looking at a sub 2 billion carry? It's a very possible situation. So if I'm a fund manager, I can't be near as bearish as what I was before, given the type of numbers we're looking at today.
Yeah. Yeah. If we get a positive close today, I think that says a lot about this market.
Absolutely.
You bet. All right. Thanks, Matt. Matt Bennett
Yep.
with agmarket.net. That is Markets Now.